Greetings, Doc John here, and I am the Entreprofessor. Welcome to the channel. Today I have a special guest, Tyler Rohrbaugh, who is from YellowDig. Tyler, welcome.
John, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. So Tyler is the head of partnerships and university partnerships with YellowDig. And I'm really excited. If you've been listening to some of my previous recordings about discussion boards and some of the things I love about them and some of the things I hate about them, this is going to be an opportunity to look at a new technology that's starting to gain some of the things that are great about discussions, but also advance those with newer technology. So Tyler's going to be here to share some with us. So Tyler, tell us a little bit about YellowDig.
Love to. Yeah, John, thanks so much for having me. YellowDig is a platform about building community. That's everything that we think about and that we do. And we're really trying to think about how we can create that kind of really vibrant conversation that you see in a face-to-face classroom for students who may not be together. And this is a problem that we've been thinking about for the last 5 to 6 years. Of course, present challenges with pandemics and so forth have brought these kinds of challenges to the forefront for faculty. So excited to share YellowDig and to be here.
Yeah. Well, as someone who taught asynchronous classes prior to the pandemic and also, synchronous classes, and seeing where some of the things that you had to think about for asynchronous in the past wasn't, really front of mind for classes when you're face-to-face in a classroom. And of course, in the last year, all classes have kind of moved into this. So it's just a great time to think about different ways to build community beyond just the kind of passing conversations when you happen to be in the room or coming in and out together. So that's great. So one of the things, I shared a couple of things recently in a video about what I love about discussion boards in terms of it's just an opportunity to give every student a voice, whether they tend to be quiet and want to kind of share what they're thinking about, but maybe a little bit hesitant to do it in a kind of an open public setting, or someone who really has a lot to say, almost too much to say, and kind of creating some constraints there. Really giving everyone that equal voice. So that's one thing I like about it. It has that community focus. But there's also some downsides in terms of students, kind of just treating it like another assignment, just, kind of turning in a couple things at the last minute, not really interacting. So tell us a little bit about how YellowDig kind of deals, brings in the best of, but also addresses some of those downsides of traditional discussion boards.
Sure. Yeah. Discussion boards have been in use for a long time. And a lot of faculty that are teaching face-to-face synchronous classes, they also use the discussion board, but maybe it was just used as an assessment tool when we had all of that class time. As more courses are turned into fully asynchronous experiences or hybridized, discussion boards are often looked at as that opportunity to build in some of the social presence, to allow students to engage with one another. And at YellowDig, we think a lot about the community of inquiry framework, which thinks about really 3 key tenets of building a student experience that will encourage the student to take ownership over their learning journey. And 2 of those tenets are teaching presence, the instructor's presence, the design of the course, cognitive presence, which is the student's ability to think and to consume and to analyze material, and social presence is the third. Discussion boards, when we really think about what they do, they're often building too much teaching and cognitive presence and not true social interactivity, opportunities for students to feel social and emotional support, like they did on the way out of the class when they're finishing conversations that start in the class that bleed into the hallway, or those conversations that they may have at the Starbucks before class. That's the kind of engagement that YellowDig's looking to capture, regardless of modality.
Yeah, that's excellent. So Tyler, tell us a little bit about how YellowDig came to be and how the platform works.
Absolutely. So YellowDig's been around for 5 to 6 years. As I shared earlier, we've been thinking a lot about this community building problem long before the pandemic arrived. And we're working with over 100 institutions globally. And these are some of the KPIs that we think the most about. How can we drive better student engagement, deeper student engagement, but not just engagement? How can we ensure that students are persisting? Are they completing courses? Are they reaching that next course in their learning journey? Yeah. And are they satisfied? And those are the KPIs that we'll often optimize as we build partnerships. And these are things that often a discussion board you're really not thinking about.
That's right. So tell us a little bit about how the platform works. What's the experience like for a student?
Great question. Great question. I think it's probably best to visualize what happens for students. I trust that those that are viewing have intimate experience with discussion boards. That's probably why you're here and engaging with Doc John. But discussion boards have been used for a wide variety of educational means and courses. When we have a face-to-face class, often they're used as an assessment opportunity. We ask every student the same question, and each student then responds. Maybe it's post once and comment twice. When we go online or in fully asynchronous courses or hybrid courses, when you ask faculty, they often feel that the discussion board is providing social presence, the social presence that would have otherwise been satisfied in the face-to-face environment.
Yeah.
But when we think about what that call and response, post once, comment twice structure does, it really builds more teaching presence and more cognitive presence. It's not truly encouraging student-to-student engagement. So with YellowDig, and we're visualizing what a YellowDig community looks like, the student engagements within it on the right-hand side of the slide, rather than everyone speaking to the same question and the instructor then moving the conversation each week with a new question, the students all thinking about just that professor and what that professor may want. Instead, in YellowDig, it is the student's job to bring questions to the table, to ask one another things that will actually spark a conversation between themselves and their peers, among many other things. But that agency has a really profound impact then on the kinds of things that students will share. And that's sort of the secret sauce, if you will, getting the students to stop worrying about the sage on the stage instructor and to think more critically about their peers and what's going to start a conversation amongst them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and when I look at these two pictures that you're showing now, I mean, the one on the left resonates a lot with me. It's one of the things that I really don't like about discussion boards is they still create this artificial time frame when something is due. And there's different ways you can try to gamify that, or extra points if they're spread out or what have you. But in the end, a lot of times things get put off to the last minute. And so you have this question that's sitting out there for a week or 2 weeks or whatever the period is. And it's really only in the last couple days that you see most of the activity. And so you don't really get that interaction on it so much as a lot of independent statements that kind of sit next to each other. Whereas, what you're showing in the right-hand picture here with YellowDig is there is a lot more continuous engagement going on between students. And the several times that I've now used it, that's exactly what I'm seeing is that early on, you have some people that start to really engage early and they maybe continue through. Some may not join later, but they're already in a conversation that's in motion, and they're diving in. And so I really like the way this particular image kind of depicts what actually happens if you look at the data, and it's very, very much resonates with my experience.
Exactly. And I mean, just think about what happens in a face-to-face environment. We're teaching entrepreneurship, and maybe we've covered exit strategies in the second week of the course.
Yeah.
If we were in a discussion board and we've already covered that, and suddenly, the latest unicorn IPOs and an announcement comes out in the news, we want that conversation around that really relevant real life example of what we may have learned a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And in an asynchronous environment, it's very easy for the instructor to inject that real life, real world conversation into the class. But if we've already written prompts and we've already talked about IPOs and exits,
right,
that conversation may not happen. So YellowDig is trying to maintain more relevancy, so the students are talking about course concepts, but with really, as they happen events in mind.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the mechanics of the platform? What is it experientially like for a student using YellowDig?
Sure. So, we've tried to emulate the really common social platforms that, all humans are familiar with today. It's not just our Gen Zers. Our baby boomers are on Facebook more than anybody these days.
Sure.
So we're taking a very familiar interface, but we're wrapping it around a point system that encourages the user, as I shared, to think about what's going to start a conversation. So as we get into the platform, and maybe I can pull up here another slide, what we try to do is encourage the students to use the platform just as they would a LinkedIn or a Facebook feed.
Nice.
And we'll maybe get in there if we have the time to actually see the platform. While that's happening, behind the scenes, we're crunching all of the data on who is engaging with whom, who is driving conversation, and we're actually then visualizing that data, much like is represented here on the slide, so that professors can act on it, so that they can find students that really need their help the most, that may be falling behind or struggling with the experience.
Yeah, so a lot of this, just the data and the analytics, I know have been, a very powerful element for this in terms of just showing if someone's not really participating, it's highlighting that. Those that are participating, if you see a conversation really taking off, who's getting engaged in that discussion. Some really, like some good visuals here of just some of the kinds of analytics that are available. Just, to see what's that kind of the health of this community. Is it operating as it should? Are people talking about the right topics? Or, there are some things that need some input. I think one thing, my experience where with discussion boards, I have always felt like there are times where I need to almost try to prompt everybody forward. I've almost found that conversations really reach their most interesting and most involved with the course material when I back away a little bit and leave the community to really drive the direction of the conversation forward.
Absolutely. Think about what happens in a face-to-face setting if we do breakout sessions with students.
Yeah.
Really great conversations happening. The instructor walks into that breakout room and suddenly everything hushes.
Right.
The same thing happens online. We have to give our students that space to talk about the things that they're interested in. But, taking it back to something that you said earlier, the discussion boards might promote a little bit of inter-student connection, or in a face-to-face setting, if we're in a lecture hall, the instructor probably thinks I'm engaged with how many of my peers? 2, 3, the people sitting around me. So there's still this problem of getting the students into one place where they can create more connections.
Right.
And we're doing that through the use of student-led, student-driven conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I think that starts to pay off that thing I love about discussion boards in terms of that equal voice. Everyone has an opportunity to contribute to the degree that they're able to, willing to, want to. And like you say, I think it extends beyond just, you might talk to 3 or 4 people at the end of a class or during a class group discussion. Whereas there's an opportunity for every student in the class to interact with every other student. So building that community.
Exactly. Those procrastinating students that normally wait till the deadline and nobody talks to them, now they're starting the conversation. Because in YellowDig, just like in Facebook, it's one feed. Yeah. You never try to scroll to the end of your Facebook feed. Right. Nobody would try to do that. Right. So in YellowDig, regardless of when you come in to have a conversation, there's always something new and engaging to engage with. And it'll bring those students that are normally falling behind. By design, it brings them closer to your go-getters. Yeah. And creates more of that, engagement between those groups that are normally isolated in the typical discussion board.
Yeah, that's excellent. So could you show us the platform? We'd love to just tell everyone a little bit about how it works.
Happy to walk everyone through the platform here. You're looking at an example of what would be maybe a Business 101 community. And for those that may be listening in that are using learning management systems and are wondering, well, how does YellowDig work with that. We have seamless integration with all of the common learning management systems. So,
yeah, I use Blackboard.
That's right.
I've also used Brightspace, and once that, and I even someone from Tyler's team helped me to set that up, where it was just a one click for students right from the LMS right into the YellowDig community. So it was really quick and easy. What I did was I ultimately embedded a link in each week's folder of activities. There was a link that just took them right from that week's activities right into YellowDig. So they just could, as they were looking through what do I need to do this week, they could click on YellowDig right from there or from a central part in the page. So it's really easy to do it in a way that almost doesn't seem like they've really left the LMS.
That's exactly what we're going for. We want it to feel like a really seamless experience. No extra logins, things to worry about, students getting access credentials and so forth. And that same ability to bring us into the platform allows us to very seamlessly pass that participation grade into the LMS. So for professors that are listening in that are spending far too many hours reading, endless amounts of discussion content, by virtue of our point system, we can save a lot of that time so you can reinvest it in actually analyzing data and real teaching and learning as opposed to just grading.
Yeah. So the gamification is an interesting one. I've had a lot of students really like it. I've had some say, hey, I feel like I'm getting points for, I'm doing things just to get the points. Talk a little bit about, what your experience has been with the gamification process and it's paid off.
I'm pulling up here just a visualization of our point system in this particular community. The important thing to highlight is that we will have a sort of default point system in here, but faculty can fully customize this as they may see fit. The typical discussion or the typical notion of participation, it always has to start with sharing. Sort of the baseline contribution has to be create a post, and we do allow you to add a certain number of words that we ask the students to use, or comment on one of your peers' posts. Now, this is where the gamification comes in. There's nothing special about awarding participation for sharing. What's special is that we're awarding participation or YellowDig points for the things that are shared that actually encourage a back and forth. So, if Doc John were to comment on my post, sure, he's getting a little bit of participation points for that comment, but I too receive points for receiving that comment.
Right. Well, one of the things I even kind of remind everyone early that you can help each other out by responding to each other and by reacting to each other. And so that I think that even has this effect of cultivating more community, because it's a sense of I'm not just responding so I can get some points, but I'm also giving points too as part of that. So it definitely has that effect of just a kind of a collective experience and being in it together.
Yep, and there are ways for the instructor to add additional points, as Doc John mentioned. Like, we encourage the instructor to model the behavior that they're looking for. They're not leading this conversation, they're modeling it, but you can use these accolades to add additional points. The beauty, a question you asked, mixed opinions from certain students, maybe grads feel one way about points versus undergrads.
Yeah.
What we believe is that, giving the student the agency, in this case, Kyle had a question. Normally you're not able to be rewarded in an asynchronous discussion for asking a question. You're only ever rewarded for showing the things that you know. So this allowed Kyle to actually earn some participation points while getting one of his needs met. Brianna responded, so she's getting her participation points while helping Kyle. And now this is one less question the instructor has to answer in office hours or in email. So all this is to say that agency allowed Kyle to have his needs met. And adults, especially adult learners, graduate learners, or anybody who may have their own experience and expertise in their own right, They don't like the really busy sort of feeling that a discussion board gives you. Whereas in YellowDig, they can share their expertise. They can ask their questions. So it allows the student to kind of find what they like about it. Now, a lot of students may be very used to that discussion board, as you shared, and it's our job to really work with them to see that value intrinsically, not just extrinsically to get a grade.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you mentioned the accolades. That's something that seems to get a lot of attention. I mean, there's a kind of a desire for students to get them, or they appreciate when they've gotten accolades. I found I could create accolades that were kind of context specific. I even had a situation recently where something came up where someone made a point that really connected what we were talking with social justice. And I didn't have an accolade created for that purpose, but I created a social impact accolade just for that. And then others started to chime in, and it was one that that really kind of encouraged a conversation to continue, which was really excellent.
Such a great example of what we would call spontaneous teaching. It's very difficult to retrofit a already designed Blackboard discussion to accommodate some of those things that you just described. So we want to allow creative faculty like yourself to do things while the course is running. Let's not wait till we get our course evals to find out that there wasn't enough conversation about social justice, or that the students really wanted to talk about that, maybe didn't get the chance. So that's so exciting to hear that you were able to do that.
Yeah, that's excellent. The other thing that has a similar effect is just the topics, like being able to create topics that really connect with major themes and learning objectives within the course. Kind of provides a little bit of framework of just knowing when they go to create a post, they can select one of those topics and say, I'm going to talk about iterative design or design thinking, or I'm going to talk about the learning loop, or that it allows them to kind of create some categories for the discussions, and for others, if they're interested in that topic, to kind of follow that topic or pull up all the threads related to that. Exactly
right. And I wanted to scroll a bit while you were speaking to that to show it's not just one topic per post. The ability to really blend things and show how something we talked about in week 2 is related to week 7, and this article really highlights it. That's what we're trying to get to here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and where I've seen that really play out is you see students starting to synthesize their learning. They're beyond just the rudiments of the kind of core concepts of the course, but they're applying them, and they're connecting the dots between them, and they're bringing them into a specific context, which is really exciting to see, where they're kind of moving into those higher levels of learning, not just focusing on kind of regurgitating back something that they saw in the text or something that was stated in the lecture.
Exactly right. The I agrees and the me toos are fewer and far between here. Because the student has to think first, which of these topics does this most closely align? Or maybe, there are multiple. They have to have that moment of critical thinking. Nobody's going to comment on my post if it's the article that Doc John shared 2 weeks ago, because the students will see that. So a lot of critical thinking happening here that we can't really get to if it's just call and response based discussions. I wanted to show here just a number of the multimedia that you can use. A lot of faculty don't like the discussions experience in the LMS because it's fairly, two-dimensional. Text, links, the links don't embed. Let's see how this goes here in a live session. I have the ability to go ahead and capture video content in the platform.
Nice.
So for a lot of professors, this humanizes it. Even when you get back face to face, do you feel like you can have a one-to-one conversation with every student? Probably not. Or in those fully asynchronous courses where you never actually get to show who you are as a professor to the extent that you might in person, this video capture feature is a great way to humanize this experience online. Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, and just even being able to bring images or video in from other sources can be such a powerful thing. I remember, one class I was teaching recently, we were using YellowDig, and we were talking about failure and the importance of failing and learning from failure. And somebody found a video that Will Smith did years ago about, the value of failure, and brought that in. And it created this whole string of discussions about, how to get more comfortable with failure, and how to really make sure failure is something that you use to extend your learning, and not something that causes you to kind of fall down or to pause. And it was just really powerful, just the way an image or a video like that can really bring something forward, or a meme. A lot of really interesting discussion can flow from that.
Exactly. That's often how we sort of express ourselves these days. It's not just text. Students are used to communicating beyond just what they're posting in words. And it's important to think about how that impacts the student experience from a learning perspective. Do the hyperlinks matter if the students aren't clicking on them?
Right.
If students aren't actually interacting with the content, is there real learning that's happening? If the instructor is the only person that reads this discussion, are the students really learning? Those are questions that we ask ourselves often.
Absolutely.
And we try to arm our faculty with data so that they can understand these tough questions themselves. Maybe there's not a lot of sharing, but the things that are said are really, truly engaged with. There's something to be said about that. It's really not just sharing behaviors that we're after.
Yeah.
The learning happens when there's listening.
Right. And these graphs, like the ones you're showing right here, have been very helpful in just seeing what types of interactions are happening. And there were times even when the stats were revealing that we weren't seeing the kind of interaction we wanted. And so I could start to correct that, or at least just, indicate like, hey, I'd like to see more back and forth on this topic, or, just start to, make some statements to draw that forward. Yeah, this is a cool view too. It was always interesting to me to see how everyone's interacting with each other.
Yeah, I pulled this up because I think it also speaks to what you just said. Professors looking at the data and then acting. Whether it's on the last screen, maybe I changed the point system. I know that's something we've talked about. Tweaking that point system a little bit to get different behavior. Yeah. Just maybe it's an anecdote, but I think it's an interesting story, and I like to tell it. We have a management professor at a university that we work with who teaches a capstone MBA course. So you would think highly engaged students, they want to be there. They're often spending a lot of time and money to be in those courses.
Yeah.
And this particular instructor noticed a student like Kyle here, who Kyle attended the Zoom sessions. Kyle was in the Zoom. He didn't engage much. But he had his camera on, he was there. But he wasn't asking questions. And it wasn't until the instructor came into YellowDig that saw a bunch of students engaging with Kyle, but really not a lot of engagement from Kyle himself. This particular view led that professor to email Kyle and say, hey, I see you in class, but I sense that there's maybe something up. And the student said that was the first time. This was their senior semester. It was the first time that a professor, since going online, had actually noticed that they were struggling. So, just really moving stuff when we hear that and are able to learn that it's this kind of technology that's letting faculty do that.
Yeah, it's really powerful. I think something you said a few minutes ago just about the point system resonated with me, and maybe my true confession here. I did, the first time through, set some of the point settings outside the recommended range, and suffered in the stats a little bit as a result. And it was helpful. Just your team helped me to see, like, hey, this is what's happening in that stat. It's probably because you've either set the word count limit too high, or you haven't put points values on this. And like you said, it was even a few little tweaks midterm did start to change those behaviors. And of course, I announced that so that it wasn't just happening unbeknownst to the team, but it almost was that when they first reviewed what they were getting scored on, it had an impact on the way they started to interact with it. And by doing a little bit of course correction there, started to see more listening or more engagement activities. And so those guidelines that are provided are very helpful. I think it's evidence of the hundreds of schools that you're using the platform with, and the many users that are on it. You've had a chance to really look at what the aggregate effects of those things are.
Yeah. It's, I know a lot of faculty have mixed opinions about the value of ed tech. Maybe the pandemic and what we've all been through in the last 18 months has changed some of that. But unlike a lot of technologies that find their way into higher ed, that start in industry, we pride ourselves on truly being an education company. Our client success team are former educators themselves, many of whom have taught face-to-face or online college courses, high school courses. Me, myself, what drove me to be here at YellowDig was an MBA experience that I felt could have had more student engagement. I was looking for a company that was really trying to improve the experience for students that maybe weren't on campus all the time.
Right.
And that's really what gets me so excited to work with faculty like you, and to get to work with just so many innovative educators, because we care a lot about the students. It's not just about the technology. It's working with faculty to make changes, to really see those outcomes that they're after.
Yeah, that's great. So I think one last topic I'd like to talk about as we wrap up is, and one you and I have talked about a lot, just assessing content, evaluating content. We've had even candidly some debates about it. That talk a little bit about just that balance between engagement versus the actual content of the engagement, and kind of that range of wanting to have good content, but at the same time not wanting to squelch engagement. So interested in your take on that.
It's a push and pull for sure. When you ask most faculty how they start with building a discussion, the first answer is often, well, let me get my rubric.
Right.
The tough part about a rubric is that it provides a roadmap for the student. But it would be really awkward if we started this conversation today by drawing a straight line of all the things we were going to cover and then hit them one by one. Just like in natural conversation, there's ebb and flow. And maybe you and I get a little off topic and then you pull me back in, but there's a certain amount of that that's really healthy in an actual conversation. If the goal for a discussion is to assess the quality of what the student is saying, our opinion at YellowDig would be, great, let's make that an assessment. Let's make that a short answer assignment. Maybe we make a quiz out of it. There's a lot of value in that. It's not that we say that there's not value in assessing the quality of a post, but if that discussion board is truly the one place in the asynchronous course where we want social presence, then let's optimize for that, because we have tests, we have projects, we have presentations where we assess what they know. Let's see if they can talk. That's a very different style of assessment. And, I welcome this debate often because I think there's good and bad on both sides, but it's really about finding that blend. How do you use the accolades to get the notion of quality into your community? How do you relinquish that control and let the students dictate quality? It's a shift that does take some time. Because there's a lot of entrenched practices that we're kind of up against with a typical discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, maybe I'll at least share a little bit of some of the back and forth we've had. I was uneasy about could this conversation just turn into another version of Facebook where it's like, oh, my dog's doing this, or what's happening with that. And of course, there is some of that. It was kind of fun when people shared like their cat picture, or some of that. You have that community feel to it. But I did find like the topics really helped to make sure that, and I think part of it was it's having that trust in the students. Like they know why they're there. They're not there to just have a chat about their hobby or something like that. They, for the most part, really did use the conversation to talk about the things that were going on in class and the topics. But having that ability to say like, this topic is important and have folks look at that, I think was really helpful. I did experiment a bit with some assessment of content, but I did do it, based on our conversations. I was much more open about it than I didn't really focus too much. I said over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be, giving some points related to this topic. And what I found is the community did focus a little more on that topic for that period of time and move on to some of the others. But those conversations still continued, and they did draw from topics of, that had happened previously or that were coming ahead, because it wasn't highly structured. So that was, but it was, I think it's just interesting to see the different sides of that.
Yeah, every professor has maybe a different set of outcomes they're looking for, and especially in courses that may be shorter, a 10-week course versus a 16-week course.
Yeah.
It's an asynchronous course. I need to know the students talked about this. Right. We would agree that there are times, where pointing them to a particular topic, as you just suggested, is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
If the discussion pedagogy is over here and we're over here, a lot of times the professors, let's try to meet in the middle and let's try and do some experimentation, as you suggested. Maybe we go a little bit further this way, maybe we go a little further that way, but we can tweak and we can grow.
Yeah, agree. It's good stuff. Well, Tyler, thanks so much for being here. It was great to hear directly from you about YellowDig, and I'm sure lots of interest. So
this is a lot of fun. I enjoy talking about YellowDig, and always good catching up with you. So I'm just fortunate for the opportunity to share, and hopefully this sparks some conversation with others here moving forward.
Absolutely. Now, if someone like me is teaching and they're thinking about YellowDig or interested in YellowDig, what are some things they can do to learn more or to get in contact with YellowDig? What are some things that they could do?
So to get in touch with me personally, my email is tyler@yellowdig.com. Nice and simple. Yeah. Anyone who may be interested, we do offer free pilots to any professor that is thinking about this for the first time. So free to your students, free to you. We have a course is really what I would recommend. There's a 1-hour course that I can share if you reach out, or we can maybe put a link to it in the comments once we wrap. Walks you through everything, lets you kick the tires a little bit, really trying to leave you with a one-stop shop for getting started if you wanted to do so.
Great. Yeah, and I'll add those links, both your email address and those links.
Great.
In the comments below. Of course, if this is the first time anyone's tuning into this channel, please subscribe. Love to expand our dialogue. This is really all about disruption in higher education. So really looking to apply the entrepreneurial process to just really advancing the way we learn together and the way we help our students to just become, reach mastery in the various fields. And this is just another great example of the kinds of technology that we want to explore on this channel. So Tyler, thanks for being here and being part of it this time.
Absolutely. I'll look forward to joining again soon.
Great. All right. So let's keep going.